Um, but uh, actually, going into the more training side now, what separates the average athlete from an elite athlete? What can turn someone from the average to the elite in your eyes?
Being coachable.
Being coachable.
Being coachable. I know so many athletes who are very coachable. I've trained a lot of like bad athletes and they're coachable. When I say bad, I meaning they're not performing in their sport, right? They're not hitting the metrics that they're trying to hit in their sport. So from a performance standpoint, I've trained a lot of bad athletes who are like, oh man, they're slow, they're not good at their skill, right?
Yeah.
But they're coachable, right? And they have a work ethic, because you can being coachable is a mindset, right?
Yeah.
That's willing to admit that you don't have all the answers, right? And that you're willing to have input, outside input for your development. And then work ethic, because you got to do the work.
Yeah.
It's like me saying, like, you could be coachable and be lazy. You got to be coachable and disciplined, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important attribute, because those same athletes that were bad, they developed and now they're great. I've also seen the opposite, where athletes that are pretty darn good, right? They have their baseline skills really, really good, but they're not coachable, and they plateau and they fade out.
Yeah.
And then you're like, where's that one athlete? I'm like, I don't even know. You know, I've known many athletes over the years that I'm like, man, this athlete has the potential to, you know, go really, really far, because, you know, their skills are so developed. And I'm like, we just got to take it a little bit further. And then ego sets in where, you know, they're not coachable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even the athlete. I find a lot of times these athletes might even get it from their parents, right?
Yeah.
Where the parents are stroking their ego all the time. And then these athletes get offended when I tell them, hey, you got to work on this, this, and this. I've had that a few times where I'll have athletes, like, I'll ask them the question, like, what's your strength? What's your weakness? So if an athlete has a game, I do this every time in season. When athletes have a game, I ask them, I said, what's your scouting report on yourself?
Yeah.
Like, what did you do well during the game? And what do you got to work on? And I've had athletes that are like, when it comes to what do I got to work on, they say the dumbest things that I know it's not what they have to work on. Right? Yeah. Meaning they almost can't find a weakness. They're like, well, I scored 25 points. I did this, I did that. I'm like, okay, well, what else? Like, what's the one area that you think we got to really polish up?
Yeah.
And they don't know.
Yeah.
And those are the athletes that plateau and they have strong egos. Like, they don't want to admit that there's a weakness there.
They don't have the Mamba mentality.
They don't have the Mamba mentality, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's just like coachability, the ability to be coachable is very, very important.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where your skill set is. If you're already good, you know, there's great.
Got to have humility and the understanding that
correct.
I mean, if you're 16 thinking you know everything, it's like, dude, I'm 24 and I know for a fact I don't know anything. And I'm sure, you know, at your age too, you're even like, I'm learning every single day. So getting that mindset into the youth athletes pretty quickly of, hey, look, you're going to learn a lot through this process. There's going to be a lot you'll learn. There is going to be a time where what you thought was right is not right. And they're going to get your whole life completely warped around, especially with the false sensitivity that social media brings nowadays too, like we just talked about a little bit earlier. Have you, and I guess kind of correlating back over to that again, I think you kind of did state it, but not fully. You've seen social media kind of cause that ego sense to go further within kids in the younger in this generation now compared to like when I was coaching with you when it wasn't as big.
Yeah, I just feel like the attitudes and the mindsets that kids have today are different.
Yeah.
And that's no secret. I think everybody would agree that today we're a little softer or maybe a lot softer than depending what generation you're from. But this generation has definitely gotten softer mentally, right? You can't tell kids, you got to be real careful. Like I said, how you word things. You can't, you know, back then, if I'd messed up, you know, I remember one time my coach got in my face because I ran a play wrong, my head coach in football. got in my face, grabbed my helmet, said some colorful words, and said, we're going to run it back, run that play again. And I was like, never once did I think he had bad intentions, right? And I think back to all the coaching I had as a kid. All my coaches were intense, right?
Yeah.
But I knew it always came from the right place. I knew I have nothing bad to say about my coaches, right?
Yeah.
But if those same coaching strategies were to be used today, oh my God, I would, those coaches would be fired. Maybe they'd be fired. I don't know.
Unless they got their tenure, but.
And here's the thing. One thing that no one ever did, like if I messed up, I didn't go back and tell mom and dad, like, oh, coach used some colorful word and told me I'm messing up here. Yeah. Right. Oh, my playing time. I would never complain about playing time, things like that. Right. Yeah. There's just the culture was so different. Right. And if people always have all these reasons on like why the culture is changing. Well, the biggest thing that's astronomically changed in the past, 10, 15 years is social media. Right. Yeah. You got to be politically correct. You got to be real careful and like how you word things. Oh, your tone of voice has to be a little different. Yeah. I know your family is military. Yeah. So is mine. And my dad, I remember he told me like how how they used to communicate with them in the military. Oh yeah. And now you're having people like complaining in the military about tone. It's like, wait a second, when we're in a combat zone and bullets are flying past your head, I can't be like, hey, can you please go get some more ammunition? There's like certain things, there are certain things that have to kind of change for retention purposes. But as far as like the getting in your face and getting on you about certain things, and it all depends on the leader, right? And the toughness. There's a certain sense of like you have to actually gain their respect too, but at the same time, you have to be able to be willing to play because when shit goes south, you have to be ready to go, and it doesn't matter. You're gonna have to yell at each other. It's a whole different mindset nowadays. I kind of told you this. I was in a weird position myself growing up because I had social media getting introduced at a younger age. We didn't quite have it as soon as like all the kids nowadays. Because iPhones, I think 6th and 7th grade was when they got big for me. That's when kids started really getting them. He just told you his age. Yeah. I'm 24. There you go. And I didn't get an iPhone or anything like that. My parents are very much old school. They said, no, we're not going to get you anything like that. I was like, okay. And there was a certain sense of social distance between me and other kids because we had this conversation the other day with a parent. There is a culture within social media that happens within the kids. And if you're not a part of that culture, they're very much like, okay, well, you stay your lane, I'll stay in my lane. And so I remember even just having the issues in high school where because I didn't have an iPhone, I wouldn't even get invited to group chats because I would turn the group chats green. So now I'm like, dude, now I'm completely isolated because of it. Yeah. And so I feel like that can be a hard part for a lot of parents is because we can probably say for a fact, what your kids are currently going through is going to be completely different from what the kids are going through in a traditional school setting. Yeah. And what's going to happen is they're going to meet in the real world and the communication is going to be completely different to a certain extent. It's wild. Yesterday, my family and I, we went to eat and we saw, my wife goes, hey, look at that table. And there's a family having dinner and there's a kid with the Nintendo literally this close to his face, right? Yeah. While they're having dinner. And I said, that's sad because the reason the kid looked like he was, I don't know, probably like 10 years old or something. They're like, if we let him play a Nintendo, he'll be quiet, which he will be. Yeah. And now they can eat dinner in peace. Yeah. I said, what's the issue with that is there's instant and there's delayed gratification in every decision we make, right? Yeah. So the quiet that mom and dad were getting from them eating a peaceful dinner while their kid was literally in their Nintendo at the restaurant. It's a quick satisfaction. That was the immediate gratification, right? Yeah. But the consequence is later on, they're not going to have quiet because now that's going to lead to maybe their son making poor decisions, not knowing how to communicate, problems in school, career. Like that's just, you don't have to be very intelligent to know this, right? Yeah. But let's say, for example, if those parents did the opposite, because I know my kids, they're not perfect by any means. And
Yeah.
we're at the restaurant and I'm like
Yeah.
telling my daughter, put your butt on the chair,
Yeah.
sit down, don't get up until someone, like, it's a constant, right?
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So if you saw that family and then you saw my family might have looked a little more
crazy,
a little more colorful.
Yeah.
Right. And then you look at that family and they're quiet.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is the husband and wife weren't even talking.
Yeah.
So they're quiet, but now we're having to spend all this energy, it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
But long term, my kids are 10, soon to be 8 and 5. Long term, when they're 15, 20, 25, I would hope that they're good humans and they're good for society. But someone who's socially awkward and doesn't want to talk, long term, that's not going to be good for society. I know the common issue that we have today is, like, for example, kids don't like to play outside. They're at school all day sitting down, and then during their recess, they are on their phones. Like, you're having elementary school kids having cell phones and they're on their phones instead of out there playing kickball.
Yeah.
Or climbing a tree or, doing something like that a kid's supposed to be doing. But then those same kids, when they come home, I know my kids are friends with kids like that. They'll knock on their door like, hey, let's go play outside. They don't want to.
Yeah.
They're playing Nintendo, playing Xbox. So this social media thing, it's not good for a lot of reasons, but it's making us less human. We don't know how to communicate. We're socially awkward. We're not athletic. Obesity in children is the highest it's ever been. Kids have diabetes now.
Yeah.
Kids, like, that's weird. That's sad. And it was unheard of, a decade ago.
Yeah. It's a very hard conversation because I look back, right? Because obviously I said I didn't have a phone for all my time going through high school and stuff too. I had a little flip phone, I think my junior, senior year, and it wasn't until after high school where I finally got my first iPhone. And just for any parents out there who are concerned about not giving their kid a phone because I wouldn't say they're completely socially awkward, right? Kids nowadays, I would say they have a certain sense of social understanding. It's a little bit different though, because they have the social media culture mindset. But it's like they would rather choose to be on their phone than to sit there with their friends and try and figure out something they can do, right? Like try and create a game, make a card game. Let's have some fun. Let's do something and interact with each other. I don't think because we actually have, I would argue, really, really confident kids too nowadays, more so than we did back then. And it's overly confident kids, overly confident. And so to kind of go back to what I'm saying is if you're fearful of not giving your kid a phone because of the social separation they'll have from the current kid with the phone, it might suck a little bit growing up for them because, again, they feel alone a little bit. Try and find areas where they can get in and interact and still. Like for me, I just did sports and I kind of get my mind off of that.
Yeah.
I still had friends I'd play video games with when I wasn't, playing outside and stuff like that if they weren't here. But eventually I went and got a job. I worked at In-N-Out. At In-N-Out, I developed the ability to speak with people. I developed those social skills that I didn't quite get in high school because people were texting or hey, don't join our group chat. You're going to get green. Yeah. And I got it through the work environment. So if you're kind of scared about that, I was very, very socially awkward to the point where I wouldn't speak. Got a couple of jobs, worked at a couple of places. I worked at a lot of service related places where I had to communicate with people. I developed those skills.
Yeah.
And I would argue I'm not the same person. I mean, I just had a clinic last week for the first time that I've ever presented in front of people since high school. The last time I presented in front of people in high school, I was pissing my pants because I hated being in front of people and having to communicate. And this time I had a little bit of nervousness, right? Because that was my last idea, but I came off strong. I had good presence and stuff because I just put myself in certain areas. So, and as they get an iPhone later on, they'll kind of understand the current social situation. But I think it's long-term, like you kind of were talking about, it's so beneficial to allow them to create relationships with their parents, right? If I'm on my iPhone or my iPad all day, I'm not talking to my parents. What relationship does that create with my parent? I can't imagine what my relationship would be with my dad and my mom right now if I never was really talking with them at the dinner table. Even if it was them yelling at me, get your butt down and stuff like that. As someone who plans on being a parent, I can understand the fear because I know what it was like personally to have that separation. it sucked for a second, but in the long term, I'm so happy that it did happen. It's just like anything with parenting, kids don't always understand what it is you're trying to do for them.
Yeah.
Until they finally realize, or they have their own kids and go, oh, I see why mom and dad did that now. That makes sense. And my mom, because my sister called my mom, and this was years ago, but I remember she told me about it. She's like, one day you're going to be thanking me because your sister's already calling me because she's got her own kids. Tell me, oh, I'm so grateful that you did this to me. I understand it now. And it takes a second, but that's kind of just life. You're not always going to understand it right off the bat.
And the thing too, obviously, keeping your kids active in sports and doing other things like that.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have time to do those things. I remember as a kid, the only thing we did have is, we had Xbox, we had a PlayStation, and but once we factor in sports, school, homework, all that stuff, like we didn't have a lot of time. It's funny, my kids, I don't allow my kids to go on any electronics at all Monday through Friday on the school night, right? Or Monday through Thursday. And on weekends, they only get 1 hour a day. But guess what they want to do on weekends? They want to go outside and play this and that. And then I remember, this was literally a couple weeks ago. They play Nintendo, right? And they'll play like sports games like Madden or something. So they'll still, I'm not living under a rock. They can still play. Yeah. They're not playing 4 or 5 hours a day. They're probably playing like an hour, 2 hours a week, right? Unless it's Christmas break, they got a little more. That's okay. My son asked me, he goes, Dad, can I play for 2 hours today? I was like, 2 hours? I was like, why would I let you play for 2 hours? He goes, well, I didn't play yesterday. I was like, well, you were outside playing with your friends and whatnot. He thought like the time rolled over. I'm like, dude, you get 1 hour, 1 hour. Yeah. That's it. You chose to go outside and play. I was like, would you have rather played your game instead? And he thought about it. He goes, oh no. So if you ask all my kids, they will tell you they love playing outside. It's a punishment for them to not be able to go outside. They don't care to play video games. Yeah. Right. However, when I first implemented that rule, it was not pretty at first, right? Because especially with, my first 2 boys, we're new parents, and, we don't know, our kid's freaking out. Yeah. We got a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old at the store. He's freaking out. You give him Ryan's toy review on YouTube, and all of a sudden, just like the scenario of the family at the dinner table, he's all quiet, and we're like, oh, thank God we get a little bit of peace and quiet, right? The issue that created is when we finally took away their video games. No, I'm sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. Before we took away their video games, every time we said, hey, it's time to turn it off, they were like a demon child, right? Their demeanor would be different. They would be irritable. They would, because I'm not too sure exactly how it works, but I do know that like how dopamine affects their appetite. So they can go a long time playing and not eating. Yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm hangry, I'm irritable. And it was like, we didn't recognize our kids. We're like, oh my God, what is going on? So that's when we started to do that. And it was tough in the beginning, right? And now it's easy. It's no big deal now. So we did it early on. But another thing I noticed is after we took away those electronics, their focus was better. Their love for playing outside was better. Just the other day, one of my kids, my oldest, he was at my work with me, and I'm training one of my clients, and I was like, oh, look at him. He's like playing with sticks and a rock. His knees are black, hands are dirty. And then he comes back in and he has like cuts on his hand and his arm. I was like, what were you doing? He goes, oh, I was climbing a tree. So we're like, he's playing like a child should play. He's climbing trees. He's playing with sticks and a rock, big rock. I'm like, whatever, looking for stuff, looking for spiders. And, I'm like, okay, like that's awesome. Yeah. So this idea that, if you do have kids that are big into the video games and the tablets and all that, and you want to bring it back down, you have to almost as a parent accept the fact that you're going to have to weather the storm. It's not going to be pretty at first. It's going to suck. And just set boundaries, right? Like, okay, once you do your homework after practice, you performance
system. You have
right?
to earn it.
You have to earn it.
Yeah. Like anything in life.
Yeah, it was bad. And I remember it was not easy at first, but now it's the best thing we ever did.
Yeah.
One of my kids, he was behaving really bad. I forget what he did last year, like hit his brother or sister or something like that. I can't remember. And I took away his Xbox. This was January of last year. He goes, how long is my punishment for? I was like, I don't know. Well, it's January 2025. I still haven't given him his Xbox back.
Has he even asked for it once?
He asked like once every like 2-3 months. And I was like, I honestly don't even know. Every time I don't tell him a time. I'm like, I honestly have no idea. I was thinking about just giving it away. And I think I might, if someone wants an Xbox, you can DM me. You might get a free Xbox. But I'm like, dude, why?
Yeah.
And he goes, all right, now they don't ask for it anymore. They just go outside. They're playing hockey. They're playing tag. They're riding their bikes. He asked me if he can go on a, like off-road mountain biking with me the other day. And we did that. So me as a parent, I'm like, man, now it means I have to move, which is good.
So question for you then. Because I know you said like get your kids outside, have them play.
Last question.
So for me, like I would say I played a decent amount of video games a day. But my situation was a little bit weirder because again, like I said, I had friends where I grew up, we were outside all the time. iPhones got introduced and then it was a pretty hard switch to where now I go over to my friend's house at 8 o'clock in the morning, the usual, knocking on his door, talking to his mom. Hey, can Chris go to the park? And then it's like, oh, he's not going to be awake till noon. And it's like, because now he's up playing video games till 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And now I'm trying to get him out of his bed. She's like, if you want to go try and wake him up again, I'm like trying to get him out. I'm like, dude, I want to go to the park. Because at the time, my mom wouldn't let me go unless I had a friend. So let's go. So I feel like for me, that's why I play video games a little bit more than I even wanted to. Was because that was the only thing I had to do. Because unless I had practice, which was only once a day, and then financially not being able to afford a trainer at certain times, for those parents, you don't have kids in your neighborhood that want to play outside. They're very much on the whole social media, staying up super late. Your kid's not. At the same time, financially, it's a little bit hard to put them into something. What can you recommend to those parents on what they can try and do still? Also working 8-hour shifts on themselves too.
Well, every situation is different. So there's no like direct answer, but the answer is just keep trying, right? Don't give up. So my kids have their group of friends that they play with outside, right? It's a small group, but they got a group of friends and they love them and they want to hang out with them all the time. You got to find people with common core values that see it the same way, but you got to keep trying. We take them nowadays. There's a lot of pretty cool programs that you can do. So like I'll use my kids as an example. My kids, besides their sports, there's a lot of recreational activities they can do, like rock climbing. And guess who's at rock climbing? Other kids. You want to find kids that rock climb, go to a rock climbing gym. Oh, wow. We found people with core values, right? It's like, it's no different. Like you want to, if you're, I go to church, right? If I want to find other people that believe in God, then I'm probably going to, the likelihood of me finding people who believe in God out of church is very, very high.
Yeah.
Right. We used to do park hopping. We would go when they were, I started doing this at like 3 years old, all the way until like maybe like 8 years old. We don't do it as much now because we're busy with sports and other things, but we would park hop. We go from park to park. I'd take my kids, we'd be playing, and then there would always be that random kid who would be like, hey, can I play with you guys? 5 minutes later, hey, Dad, I'm just going to play with him. Cool. And now they're playing tag with some kids they met. And you start to find, so you got to go look for it, right? So as a parent, you got to put the effort, you got to keep fighting to do that, right?
Yeah.
And then you build up that circle. That you don't have to be friends with everybody because that would be like a social media thing, right? How many followers do I have? How many people like me? Yeah. But the reality is, even me as a kid, and most people I know, everybody, even if you were quote unquote popular, in high school, you still had your core group of maybe like 3 or 4 guys you hung out with.
Yeah.
It was always the same 3 or 4. So we have to keep trying, put them in scenario. If they're young, like meaning 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, put them in programs that, kind of like my PE program. Yeah. Just got to throw that in there. Just got to toss that in there.
The football
No,
program.
but in all reality, they've gone to parkour. There's a lot of parents out there that share the same feelings that I share, that you share. So it's not that hard.
Yeah.
It just requires effort, and you got to keep trying.
Yeah.
Now saying, hey, go figure it out on your own, leaving your kid on his own and let him figure it out, and hopefully he just finds friends. Back then you can do that. You can't do that nowadays anymore. You have to put a little extra effort. And then once you find that core group, then hang out with them.
Yeah.
So that's my suggestion, is just keep trying, keep working at it.
You can as much as possible.
Yeah. That's all. I can't, everyone's work situation is different.
It's a little different. Yeah. Yeah. The reason I asked is because similar situation for me. Right. And there's also people, it's California, man. It's expensive out here. And I know this podcast is more aimed towards people within our area too. So they're listening, they're going the same thing like, yeah. And you know how much rent is just nowadays and stuff, and all the stuff that's been going on. So yeah, no, just as much as you can, keep them active. It's really tough nowadays.
Rec leagues, that's another one. I should have thrown that in there. There's a lot of rec leagues that are very, very cost effective. I know my kids, they play hockey, and it's like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, playoffs, championship included. And it's like, I don't know. It's very cheap. I want to say it's like less than $200 for like the whole league for the whole season. And one of the cool things too is these leagues, the parents, they understand how much things cost, like equipment. And now you have like OfferUp, and you have all these different sideline swap, and you have all these different websites where parents are recommending, oh, we found cleats cheap here. We found, you can find a good baseball bat here, a glove. Yeah. So because kids are constantly growing, right? So people are getting rid of it. So when it comes to rec teams, it's not very expensive. I think one of my kids both of my kids, they played a basketball league, and I think it was like $125 for like the whole season. So there's a lot of ways that you can get your kids active and in similar groups where it's not going to break the bank. I-9, I know my kids have played flag football there since they were like 5 years old. Same thing. It's like $150 for 10 games or something like that.
As long as the cleat works and it's not going to break on them, it's fine.
Yeah, it's not that serious.
You can get nowadays is going to be better than what you had when you were growing up, and you play with what you had growing up and we're fine. So I'm like, anything you can find, it's going to be better. You
just got to do your homework a little bit. As a parent, you just got to do a little bit of homework, but keep trying. I'm a big fan of rec leagues, travel leagues. It depends where your kid's at. Let him get some baseline development, but don't get pressured into like, my kid has to do travel.
I think it also depends on the team you want to play with. This is more of a basketball perspective, knowing how basketball travel ball has turned into from when I was playing into what it is nowadays, and how it's more of just a no defense, full offense, just trying to show off all your skills and dribble moves. So kind of, again, it depends on the league and the team and what your intentions are with your kid. Are you just trying to have them go show out and or you don't actually want them to learn within it? So travel ball can be a bit funky for me.
There you go.